With me now is United States Senator and medical doctor Roger Marshall, a Republican of Kansas. And, Senator, it's good to have you back here. Thanks for joining us.
You bet, Guy. Glad to be on with you. I think we got some great topics today.
We do, and I know one of them is something that your office had sent over. You had written this op-ed in Newsweek calling President Joe Biden the true threat, the real threat to democracy. What do you mean by that?
Well, listen, I think that what Joe Biden is running on is claiming that Donald Trump's the threat to democracy, but in reality, he's the threat to democracy. Joe Biden is the threat to democracy. If we don't have a border, we don't have a sovereign nation. If we don't have law and order, if we don't have equal application of the law, then we don't have a democracy. If we threaten people's constitutional rights, we don't have a democracy. If we don't have a strong economy, how can we possibly remain a democracy? And, of course, I like the word republic better, but that's what I mean by that, is that Joe Biden is the true threat to democracy.
Okay. And is that partially pushback on what obviously the Democrats are telegraphing will be maybe the number one argument they're going to try to make against Donald Trump in the general election if he's the nominee?
Oh, absolutely. We were anticipating that this would be their number one issue going forward, this and the sanctity of life. So we have been, working on this for to democracy here. And we think it's Joe Biden, whether it's his vaccine mandates, his mask mandates, disobeying the law, giving out student loan money repayment without congressional authority. We want to be ready to just jump right on it. So when he came out with his first real campaign speech, we'd be ready to go with this, that Joe Biden is the true threat to democracy.
Senator, I'm sure you've seen this column in the Kansas City Star, headline, Roger Marshall is finally taking COVID seriously. Is that just because it got personal? Someone named Joel Mathis wrote this, and he opens by saying, sometimes Roger Marshall just seems so close to getting it. And he kind of upbraids you for not taking COVID seriously enough, but because you have a loved one suffering from long COVID, maybe that personal connection is opening your eyes to some extent, and he's kind of saying you haven't really been responsible from your position as a senator and a doctor. You and I have talked about COVID all the way back during the pandemic itself. We had you on the show a fair amount because your medical expertise was valuable to us. When you see this kind of argument being made, I wonder what your response is.
Well, I haven't seen the article. Look, I think that we should be holding China accountable right now. Not only did 1 million Americans die from COVID, we have 16 million with long COVID, which happens to be one of my loved ones. And though the NIH stays focused only on a vaccine solution, they should be focused on real-world solutions. What new medicines, what repurposed medicines can we be using to treat this long COVID? And I think, by the way, everything that I said, starting back in January of 2020 has been proven true. Everything that I said about this, the people with viruses, many of them pregnant. So I was very comfortable talking what I thought would and wouldn't work. So, and, even this last week, new news coming out that through EcoHealth that they were funding indeed a project exactly what fit the description of COVID. And even today that China continues to do research in this viral gain of function realm. And now they have a SARS-CoV virus that attacks brain cells. And America, again, still funding this. So I'm not going to take much stake in what the article was talking about. The Kansas City Star continues to attack anybody with conservative values, so we don't pay a lot of attention to it.
Since you've mentioned China a few times, this is an issue that I think has been a little bit of a sleeper one, and it's come up occasionally on presidential debate stages, and I've seen a number of U.S. senators talking about it. I know that they've made and taken steps in various states, Florida and elsewhere, to try to reverse this and ban this sort of thing. But you have been talking and raising a red flag about the purchase of U.S. farmland by Chinese entities and just foreign entities in general buying up a lot of land, some of which all across the United States, some of which is in very close proximity to various U.S. military bases. And I'm sure that there are anodyne explanations for some of the purchases, and you don't want to get overly conspiratorial. But when you also start to see, foreign companies, foreign entities, shell corporations, individuals buying up parcels of land that could have strategic value all across the country, it's at least something to pay some attention to, right? Can you talk to us about what you're seeing on this issue?
You bet, Guy. So food security is national security. We as Americans are so blessed. We take food for granted. But in this particular instance, I'm concerned about the entire food chain and foreign influence. You mentioned China stepping up their purchase of farmland, specifically next to military bases. That's, of course, concerning. To me, probably the bigger concern, though, is their control of food production. So, for instance, Smithfield is the largest pork producer in America, pork processor in America. They process about a fourth of the pork, and of course, that's China owns that. There's a Brazilian company that owns a beef packing plant that controls about a fourth of the beef processing in America as well. And probably my biggest concern, though, is intellectual property and biosecurity. So these Chinese nationals that we have all over the country that are working for our universities, doing research in agriculture, stealing our intellectual property. And then there's this opportunity for biosecurity issues that, could China, much like they developed a SARS-CoV virus, could they develop some type of virus that would kill chickens in the United States, but they would be able to insert a trait in their chicken that would protect them? And I know that sounds a little bit futuristic, but certainly we have the ability to do that today, and COVID was a great example of it. So food security is national security. We need to elevate the USDA, the Secretary of Agriculture, onto the CFIUS committee, which evaluates foreign investments one by one to see if they're a national security threat.
Do you think that this has maybe flown under the radar for too long? Do you think that there might be some insidious things at play, at least with some of these purchases? Because it's not that far-fetched.
I think elections have consequences, and the White House is. They maybe are overly pro-China. I think that the White House is going to have to take attention to this and evaluate so many more things from a national security perspective. Again, I get asked over and over, my gosh, China's Navy's getting too big and this and that and the other, but I'm much more concerned about China's intellectual property theft, their cybersecurity attacks, all those things I need to be at the forefront as we think about national security.
Well, I'm concerned about all of the above that you just mentioned. And since you invoked the Chinese Navy getting bigger, I don't know if you saw this, but John Kirby at the White House was asked about these Houthi attacks on ships in the Red Sea, these terrorist attacks. And I know that finally the U.S. and some of our partners are fighting back and bombing the Houthis, and there's an active battle against them, and we've already lost 2 Navy SEALs horribly in that fight. John Kirby was talking about this, and he just kind of mused that one of the real solutions to the problem might be China getting more involved, because China has more leverage over Iran. Iran might listen to China. So he was urging the Chinese to intervene to basically try to get Iran to call off the dogs of their terrorists who are not just harassing and attacking ships, but also attacking Americans, as are various Iranian proxies on basically a daily basis now. I understand the point he's making, but it is odd to see the spokesman for the White House National Security Council looking at a threat facing the world and Americans and saying, boy, China, we need China to deal with them.
I think most of all, big picture is Joe Biden has given us war through weakness. Going back to Afghanistan all the way up today, nobody respects us. Nobody's afraid of us. Certainly, China has more to lose, I think, as we think about what's passing through the Suez Canal and through the Persian Gulf, all that area. China has the most to lose, but to invite them in there just seems like not the right thing to do. They're not dependable, and we want to maintain our influence. So I think that was a fairly foolish statement, and we'll just leave it at that.
Last question, less than a minute. I'm going to be going, in all likelihood, back down to the border next month to learn more down there, unlike the president and the vice president. I saw a report today that Border Patrol has arrested a cartel member in El Paso who has made over 40 illegal entries into the United States just in the past 2 years. 40, Senator. And the president says we don't have a crisis at the border. Quickly, your reaction.
Well, he's wrong. All you have to do is come to Kansas. We're losing a Kansan every day to fentanyl poisoning, 300 across the country, human trafficking exploding. The cartel is very poised throughout the country, including Kansas. It is absolutely a crisis. The number one threat to our national security today, immediate threat, is this open southern border.
That is the outrageous reality. We'll talk to Senator Blackburn about it later.